Today, Jack is going to restore the treadle part of an antique sewing machine. Today's action is not on the head, which is working fine. I actually use this treadle to power my serger. I know I'm peculiar, but I've been enjoying the exercise this gives me for 30 years. Unfortunately, it's become a touch too much exercise lately. I can barely draw breath while pushing it. It's so difficult.
The thing to remember with these old treadles is they're old cast iron. They're rigid, but they'll break in a heartbeat. Do all your tapping with a drift or small hammer, and any prying that you do it very carefully. One of the hardest things is what I try to do first. Back out those screws that are holding the retention collars on either side of the treadle. And yes, an adjustable wrench works just fine, but you'll notice I lever against the frame itself to break them loose. One thing you're bound to notice is the crud of ages is going to come out with everything that you loosen, so be prepared to do quite a bit of cleanup. Once you get the shaft freed up, of course, it wants to spin on the other side instead of letting you back the other nut out. So what I've done is got a small pair of locking needle nose pliers to carefully hold the shaft while I back these nuts out. If it's your first time doing one of these, loosen everything before you take it completely apart. You'll notice this frame jumps the minute I get that nut backed off the end of the shaft. Now we need to remove the top. We just used a cedar board, but you have to free it from the cabinet because you're going to find we're going to take each side of this framework apart. Now the screws that hold it together haven't been moved in forever. So you'll notice I'm using a pair of needle nose locking pliers. I want to initially break it loose before I try a screwdriver. And yes, a small pipe wrench is invaluable for breaking these loose. Then you can get them off with your screwdriver. Back them off carefully. They will break. Once they're loose, you can go ahead and use your screwdriver to get them the rest of the way out, but you're going to see that on the other side, I'm going back to the pipe wrench. You have to break them loose. Initially, they were put in pretty tight, and now you can see that they've been painted over. And we've got to remove the belt guard from outside of the wheel. And you see me just casually throwing hardware. It's because I have a butter container on the other side. And again, if you're going to do any prying, pry very, very carefully. Here we're trying to free the wheel to get the threads from around the shaft. Normally you could, as I'm trying to do, use a pipe wrench to free that swedge. If it turned just a little bit, you could tap it back out. But again, tapping on these things is a very risky thing to do. We end up just leaving the wheel attached and using the space that I've gained on this end to get all the threads out of it, and then it moves fairly smoothly. Here comes one side completely off to be cleaned up. The other side is the same process. Now, you have to keep in mind that the belt guard is on one side. There's no screw holes for the belt guard on the other side. And here we are. We're all freed up. And yeah, that didn't do us any good at all. So now's the time for some major cleanup. The brass brush comes out, and we got to get this as clean as we can. Bear in mind, a lot of these were just a showpiece in antiques. So people black painted them so that you could stick a tabletop on them and have them look cute. But we actually want it to work. And here you can see more threads coming out. That's the way we want the action to be. Catherine may not lose 20 pounds every time she tries to use her serger if it stays this smooth. Cleanup is important. Yes, the brass brush is my main tool, but I also have a scraper and some steel wool. Now notice these retention collars. They've got a beveled edge, but the edge is thin on one side and thick on the other side. That's because there's a load put on it from the top. When you use the treadle, Notice the position the screw holes are in when you take them off. Now we're looking at some cleaned up stuff. I also got out my scrubs in a tub to help wipe these things down. Reassembly is just like disassembly. Start everything before you tighten anything up to keep things from getting misaligned. And there's the little swedge that we took out to free that shaft up to begin with. Don't lose the washer. See, it doesn't take much to seat that. This is what America lives for. Now setting the collars, you have to be sure that the drive shaft, the little wooden drive shaft, is aligned correctly so it moves straight up and down. And these collars will break. We've broken one on 2 different treadles. Thank goodness they're both new homes. So I'm going to rob one to fix the other. You see how it shifts back and forth? I'm now aligning it so that the rod you see in the foreground does stay centered on the wheel. You don't want any adverse torque when you're trying to treadle. It should be pretty smooth. The only load should be driving whatever machine is on the other end of the belt. And this is where they need to be tight, but if you get them too tight, they'll break. And you notice on the treadle wheel side, you have to get it at an angle away from the wheel, and on the other side, you put it in the opposite angle away from center. Almost ready to put the top on and try it. These were well made. I did not have to tap any threads on the casing, and I didn't have to die off any of the threads on the screws. Again, don't tighten anything till it's all back together, and actually you have the top on. The top screws that you saw us taking out with the pipe wrench, put them back in with the screwdriver. Don't tighten them up till the top is on. I used the old lined up screw holes to put the top on. The screw you see me putting in here is actually to keep the swedge lock to hold the wheel in place. But bear in mind, if you take that screw out, that's a great place for a drop of heavy oil. Put the screw back in and it helps that section of shaft stay lubricated for the wheel turn.